The air was thick with anticipation as the rehearsal dinner for my daughter Marissa's wedding kicked into high gear. I watched with pride as she stood beside her fiancé, Kevin, basking in the glow of well wishes from our family and friends. Little did I know that the evening's joyous atmosphere was about to be shattered by the very person I had tried so hard to embrace as my own. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" Marissa's voice rang out, silencing the room. My husband Ron and I exchanged a puzzled glance as she raised her glass. "I want to take this moment to address the elephant in the room," she declared, her eyes fixating on me with an icy stare. "Elise, you may call yourself my stepmother, but the truth is, you're nothing more than an unwelcome intruder in my life." Gasps echoed through the stunned guests as Ron's face drained of color. I felt as though I had been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of me by her cruel words. "Marissa, what is the meaning of this?" Ron demanded, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Don't act so surprised, Dad," she sneered. "You know damn well that this woman has been trying to worm her way into our family since day one. Well, I'm done pretending. She's not my mother, and she never will be." The venom in her words sliced through me like a knife. I desperately searched her face for any trace of the sweet, loving girl I had known, but found only contempt and hatred staring back at me. "Marissa, please, let's not do this here," I pleaded, my voice cracking with emotion. "Why not?" she spat. "This is my day, and I'll say whatever I damn well please." Ron's fists clenched at his sides as he struggled to maintain his composure. "That's enough," he warned, his jaw set in a firm line. "We're leaving. Now." Marissa merely shrugged, her lips curling into a cruel smile as she turned her back on us, leaving me to face the judgmental stares and whispers of our stunned guests. As we made our way to the exit, I could feel the weight of their gazes boring into me, questioning what kind of monster I must be to inspire such hatred in my own stepdaughter. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled down my cheeks, and I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. In the car, Ron's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, his face etched with a mixture of fury and anguish. "I don't know what's gotten into her, Elise," he said, his voice strained, "but I promise you, I won't let her get away with this." I nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to speak. As we drove away, leaving the smoldering ruins of what should have been a joyous occasion behind us, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the bright, loving girl I had once known. And more importantly, what twisted path lay ahead for our family in the wake of her explosive betrayal. It was hard to pinpoint the exact moment when Marissa's resentment towards me took root. Perhaps it began the day I married her father, Ron, officially becoming her stepmother. Or maybe the seeds were sown even earlier, planted by her manipulative mother, Clara. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Clara had cooed, her perfectly manicured nails stroking Marissa's hair. "No one can ever replace your real mother." Even then, her words left a bitter taste in my mouth. But I pushed it aside, determined to build a loving bond with my new stepdaughter. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," I assured Marissa gently. "I just want us to be friends." She nodded, but her vacant stare betrayed no warmth or affection. It was as if a wall had already been erected, fortified by her mother's poisonous whispers. In those early days, Marissa was cordial enough, if a little distant. But as time passed, her facade began to crumble, revealing the deep-seated animosity that had been festering beneath the surface. "Why are you always trying to butt into my life?" she snapped one evening as I innocently inquired about her plans for the weekend. Ron shot her a reproachful look. "Marissa, don't speak to your mother like that. She's not my mother." Marissa exploded, her face contorted with rage. "And I'm sick of her acting like she is." With that, she stormed off, leaving me reeling from the venom in her words. Ron could only shake his head, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resignation. From that moment on, Marissa's disdain for me grew more overt. She would roll her eyes whenever I entered a room, making snide remarks under her breath. Simple requests or offers of help were met with scathing rebuttals, as if my very presence was an affront to her existence. "You're not fooling anyone with your phony concern," she sneered one day after I asked if she needed a ride to her friend's house. "Marissa, that's enough," Ron warned, his patience wearing thin. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. It soon became clear that Clara was the driving force behind Marissa's escalating resentment. Whenever we crossed paths, her saccharine smile barely concealed her delight in our strained relationship. "I don't know what you've done to turn my daughter against you," she would simper, her eyes glinting with malice. "But I suppose you'll have to live with the consequences." And live with them I did, as Marissa's hatred festered like an open wound, poisoning our family dynamic with each passing day. Little did I know that her callous disregard for my feelings was merely a precursor to the true depths of her cruelty, depths from which there might be no escape. Marissa's descent into manipulation and malice only deepened after she dropped out of college. With no direction or purpose, she seemed determined to make our lives a living hell, using her grievances as leverage to extort money and sow chaos within our family. "Give me $5,000, or I'll tell everyone what a horrible stepmother you are," she hissed one day, cornering me in the kitchen. I recoiled in shock. "Marissa, where is this coming from? I've tried my best to be good to you." "Save it," she spat. "Just give me the money and I'll leave you alone for a while." Desperation clawed at my chest as I realized the depths of her depravity. I don't have that kind of cash on hand." Her eyes narrowed to slits. "Then I suggest you find it, unless you want your precious reputation ruined." From that day on, it became a regular routine. Marissa would demand increasingly larger sums, her threats growing more vile and unhinged with each refusal. Ron was caught in the crossfire, desperately trying to placate both of us while struggling to understand his daughter's abrupt downward spiral. "Please, just give her what she wants," he begged me one night after another explosive confrontation. "I can't stand all this fighting." But I knew that giving in would only embolden her further, so I stood my ground, even as Marissa's tactics grew more insidious. "You think you're so high and mighty with your perfect little job at the high school," she sneered. "Just wait until everyone finds out what a fraud you really are." The implied threat chilled me to the bone. I could only imagine the kinds of vicious lies she was capable of spreading, poisoning the minds of my colleagues and the students I had sworn to guide and protect. Through it all, Clara remained ever present, her malicious grin a silent endorsement of her daughter's twisted behavior. "You reap what you sow, Elise," she taunted during one of her frequent unwelcome visits. "Maybe if you had been a better stepmother, Marissa wouldn't be acting out like this." Her words were like salt in an open wound, fueling the maelstrom of emotions that threatened to consume me. Anger, hurt, betrayal, they all swirled together in a toxic brew, leaving me feeling helpless and adrift. But even as the storm raged around me, a tiny flicker of resolve began to burn within. I could no longer be a passive victim in my own life. If Marissa wanted a war, then a war she would get. It was time to fight back, to expose her for the manipulative, soulless creature she had become. And if Clara thought she could continue to pull the strings from the shadows, she had another thing coming. The time for playing nice was over. From that moment on, I vowed to do whatever it took to protect my family, even if it meant going to extremes I never could have imagined. As Marissa's wedding day drew nearer, her demands and disrespect reached staggering new heights. It was as if she took perverse pleasure in tormenting me, pushing the boundaries of my patience until I teetered on the edge of a breakdown. "I need another $3,000 for my dress alterations," she announced one evening, not even bothering with a greeting as she barged into the living room. Ron shot me a pleading look, but I had reached my limit. "No, Marissa. Enough is enough." Her eyes widened in mock surprise. "Oh, and what are you going to do about it, Elise? Cry to Daddy like you always do?" My hands balled into fists at my sides, fury pulsing through my veins. "You ungrateful brat, everything your father and I have done, we've done for you, and this is how you repay us?" Marissa threw her head back and laughed, the sound grating on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, please, don't act so high and mighty. We both know you're just a pathetic, insecure woman trying to buy her way into our family." That stung more than I cared to admit. But before I could respond, she delivered the final blow. "You think the school really wants a washed-up loser like you around their students? Wait until they hear about your little drinking problem." My heart plummeted into my stomach as I realized the depths of her depravity. She was planning to spread vicious lies to destroy my career and reputation in one fell swoop. "Marissa, that's enough!" Ron bellowed, his face flushed with rage. But she merely smirked, reveling in the chaos she had sown. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A steely resolve took hold, hardening me against the torrent of emotions that threatened to drown me. I would no longer be a victim, cowed by her twisted games and manipulation. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "and don't come back until you're ready to start acting like a decent human being." Marissa's eyes widened, taken aback by my sudden defiance. But then her lips curled into a sneer, and she leaned in close, her breath hot on my face. "You'll regret this, Elise. I promise you that." With those parting words, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a tense silence in her wake. Ron watched her go, his expression a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. "I'm sorry, Elise. I don't know what's gotten into her," he murmured, rubbing his temples warily. But I knew better. This was no sudden change. It was the culmination of years of resentment and manipulation, carefully orchestrated by Clara's poisonous influence. As I replayed Marissa's vicious threats in my mind, a cold, hard knot of determination took shape within me. She thought she could ruin my life on a whim, using her venom-laced lies as weapons to tear me down. Well, she was gravely mistaken. If it was a war she wanted, then it was a war she would get. And this time I had no intention of playing by her rules. Marissa's cruel threats echoed in my mind, fueling a burning determination to expose her true nature before it was too late. I knew I couldn't rely on Ron for support. He was too blinded by his love for his daughter to see the monster she had become. No, if I wanted to protect myself and our family, I would have to take matters into my own hands. That's when Derek entered the picture. He had been Marissa's boyfriend a few years back, before her descent into manipulation and greed. A chance encounter at the grocery store led to an unlikely conversation, and soon the pieces began to fall into place. "She's not who you think she is," Derek confided, his eyes clouded with remorse. "The things she told me about you and Ron, they were all lies." My blood ran cold as he recounted tale after tale of Marissa's deceit, how she had painted me as an overbearing, controlling stepmother, desperate to wedge myself into their tight-knit family, how she had claimed Ron was an abusive tyrant, lording his power over them with an iron fist. I believed every word, Derek admitted, shame coloring his cheeks. She was so convincing, so full of anger and resentment. It wasn't until after we broke up that I started to see the truth. As he spoke, a clearer picture of Marissa's depravity began to emerge. Her tangled web of lies, carefully constructed to turn everyone against me, had been years in the making. And at the center of it all was her mother, Clara, pulling the strings like a skilled puppeteer. "She's been poisoning Marissa's mind against you since the beginning," Derek revealed, filling her head with all sorts of twisted ideas about how you were trying to replace her mother. Bile rose in my throat as the pieces clicked into place. All this time, I had been the target of their vindictive campaign, cast as the villain in their twisted narrative. But Derek's revelations didn't end there. He went on to describe Marissa's true motivations for her upcoming nuptials, a cold, calculated bid for wealth and status. "She doesn't love Kevin," he scoffed. "She's just using him as a stepping stone to the life she thinks she deserves. Once she's got her hooks in, she'll bleed him dry and move on to the next poor sucker." A shudder ran through me at the casual cruelty in his words. I had always suspected Marissa's affections were shallow, but to hear the truth laid bare was still a bitter pill to swallow. As Derek and I parted ways, my mind was reeling with the information he had shared. For too long, I had been a passive bystander, allowing Marissa and Clara to dictate the narrative. But now, armed with the truth, I knew what I had to do. It was time to take the fight to them, to shatter their carefully constructed illusions and expose the twisted reality beneath. No more playing the victim, no more cowering in fear of their threats and lies. From that moment on, the gloves were coming off, and when the dust settled, there would be no doubt as to who the real villain was. The day of Marissa's wedding dawned bright and clear, but the atmosphere inside the church was thick with tension. As I watched her preen and primp in front of the mirror, a cold sense of determination settled over me. This would be the day when the truth was finally laid bare. You look beautiful, sweetheart, Clara cooed, adjusting Marissa's veil with a saccharine smile. Just like a princess on her special day. Marissa beamed, basking in her mother's praise like a flower turned towards the sun. The sight made my stomach churn. Yes, a real-life fairy tale, I interjected, unable to resist the dig, complete with a handsome prince and a wicked stepmother. Clara's eyes narrowed, but Marissa merely laughed, either oblivious or uncaring of the implications behind my words. Speaking of wicked stepmothers, she said coolly, I'm surprised you even showed up, Elise. After the way you've been treating me, I half expected you to boycott the whole thing. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. Oh, believe me, I thought about it, but I wouldn't miss this for the world. Before she could respond, Ron poked his head into the room, a strained smile plastered on his face. Everything okay in here? Just peachy, Dad, Marissa simpered. Elise and I were just having a little heart-to-heart. The sarcasm in her tone was palpable, but Ron seemed determined to ignore it. Well, it's almost time. You ready, kiddo? Marissa nodded, her expression shifting to one of pure eagerness as she prepared to make her grand entrance. As the music swelled and the doors opened, I took a steadying breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The ceremony itself passed in a blur, a carefully choreographed dance of hollow vows and feigned sincerity. But as Kevin and Marissa prepared to seal their union with a kiss, I knew it was time to strike. Stop! I cried out, my voice ringing through the hushed chapel. This wedding cannot proceed. A collective gasp rippled through the stunned crowd as all eyes turned towards me. Marissa's face contorted in fury, her hands balling into fists at her sides. What is the meaning of this? She hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. Taking a deep breath, I fixed her with a steely gaze. The meaning, Marissa, is that I can no longer stand idly by while you continue to lie and manipulate those around you. Clara paled, realization dawning in her eyes. But before she could intervene, I pressed on, pulling out the damning evidence Derek had provided, a treasure trove of texts, emails, and recordings that laid bare Marissa's web of deceit. For years, you've been spinning a tangled web of lies, turning everyone against me while positioning yourself as the innocent victim, I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. Well, no more. It's time for the truth to come out. As I methodically laid out the proof of her treachery, detailing her twisted schemes and selfish motivations, a stunned silence fell over the chapel. Marissa's mask of composure cracked, her face twisting into a grotesque snarl of rage and disbelief. You lying bitch, she spat, lunging towards me with clawed hands. How dare you try to ruin my special day? But it was too late. The damage had been done, the truth laid bare for all to see. As Kevin's family recoiled in horror, their expressions mirroring the shock and betrayal rippling through the crowd, it became clear that Marissa's carefully constructed house of cards was crumbling around her. In that moment, as she stood alone and exposed, a twisted shell of the girl she once was, I felt a strange sense of pity, mingled with triumph. The war was finally over, and I had emerged victorious. Not through manipulation or deceit, but by shining a light on the ugly truth that had been festering in the shadows for far too long. The aftermath of my explosive revelation was like a bomb going off, shattering the illusions we had all been living under for far too long. As the stunned silence gave way to a cacophony of shouts and gasps, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. How could you? Marissa raged, her face twisted into an ugly mask of hatred. This was supposed to be my perfect day. Your perfect day was built on a foundation of lies, I shot back, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning within me. Did you really think you could go on deceiving everyone forever? She opened her mouth to respond, but the words died on her lips as Kevin stepped forward, his expression a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. Is it true? He asked hoarsely, his eyes pleading with her to deny the damning evidence I had laid bare. Were you just using me this whole time? For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then that familiar sneer curled her lips, and I saw the glimmer of cold calculation in her eyes. Of course not, baby, she cooed, reaching out to caress his cheek. You know how much I love you. Elise is just trying to stir up drama like she always does. My nails dug into my palms as I fought the urge to slap that phony look of innocence right off her face. Didn't she realize the game was up? Apparently not, as she turned her venomous glare back towards me. "This is all your fault," she spat. "If you had just left well enough alone, none of this would be happening." "Enough!" The booming voice rang out, startling us all. I turned to see Ron, his face flushed with anger and shame. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," he said, shaking his head slowly. "My own daughter, lying and manipulating everyone around her for her own selfish gain." Marissa's mouth worked soundlessly, but no retort came. For once, she seemed at a loss for words in the face of her father's obvious disappointment. "I don't know you anymore," Ron continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The sweet, loving girl I raised, she's gone, isn't she?" An uneasy silence fell over the room as we all watched the realization sink in, not just for Marissa, but for Clara as well. The women locked eyes, a silent battle of wills playing out between them. Then, finally, Clara spoke. "Well," she snapped, her gaze boring into her daughter, "aren't you going to say something? Defend yourself?" But Marissa remained mute, her shoulders slumped in defeat. In that moment, she looked smaller than I had ever seen her, a hollow shell of the entitled, manipulative brat she had become. With a disgusted snort, Clara turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. One by one, Kevin's family followed suit, their expressions ranging from pity to outright revulsion. And just like that, it was over. The grand spectacle Marissa had so carefully orchestrated lay in ruins around her, the shattered remnants of her twisted dreams. As Kevin fled the church, his face a mask of anguish, I couldn't help but feel a pang of remorse. He was just another victim in Marissa's game, an unwitting pawn to be used and discarded at her whim. But the remorse quickly overshadowed by a sense of grim satisfaction. The truth was out, laid bare for all to see. There would be no more lies, no more manipulations, only the bitter taste of karma and the harsh reality that Marissa had brought this reckoning upon herself. The days following the disastrous non-wedding were a whirlwind of chaos and reckoning. As word of Marissa's deception spread like wildfire, she found herself increasingly isolated, a pariah in the very community she had once hoped to conquer. I'll never forget the look on her face when she showed up on her mother's doorstep, desperate for a lifeline after the ashes of her grand schemes. "Please, Mom," she pleaded, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You have to help me. I have nowhere else to go." But Clara merely regarded her with a mixture of revulsion and pity, her perfectly painted lips curling into a sneer. "Help you?" she echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her throat. "After the public spectacle you made of yourself? Of our family?" Marissa recoiled as if struck, her eyes widening in disbelief. But you're my mother. You're supposed to be on my side, no matter what." "Your side?" Clara shook her head slowly. "Don't you see, you foolish girl? There are no sides anymore. You've burned every bridge, alienated everyone who ever cared about you with your bottomless greed and lies." Her words cut deep, each syllable a razor-sharp blade slicing into the fragile remnants of Marissa's ego. I could see the exact moment when the truth sank in, when the reality of her isolation became too much to bear. You can't mean that," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "Mom, please." But Clara merely stepped back, her expression hardening into a mask of cold indifference. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said flatly. "The daughter I raised would never have stooped to such despicable lows. You've made your bed, Marissa. Now you can lie in it, alone." With those final damning words, she turned and disappeared back into the house, leaving Marissa standing on the doorstep, a shattered, broken thing. In the weeks that followed, I watched as the once proud, yet entitled young woman was slowly ground down by the weight of her own actions. Her usual haunts, the trendy bars and upscale boutiques she had once frequented, now regarded her with thinly veiled disdain, whispers and pointed stares trailing in her wake. Even her so-called friends abandoned her, unwilling to be associated with such a public disgrace. And through it all, Ron and I stood resolute, our bond forged stronger than ever in the crucible of her betrayal. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," he murmured one evening as we watched Marissa slink past, her head bowed in shame. "But you were right all along. She brought this on herself." I said nothing, merely giving his hand a gentle squeeze. Words seemed inadequate in the face of such a bitter reckoning. As the dust settled and our community began to heal from the shockwaves of Marissa's lies, Ron and I found ourselves on the receiving end of an outpouring of support and gratitude. The families we had helped, the students whose lives I had touched, they all rallied around us, offering their thanks for standing up to the manipulation and deceit that had nearly torn us apart. And in those moments of connection, of seeing the true depths of human kindness and resilience, I found a sense of peace and purpose that had been sorely lacking in the darkest days of Marissa's reign of terror. She had sought to destroy me, to reduce me to a mere footnote in the grand narrative she had constructed for herself. But in the end, it was her own selfish impulses that proved to be her undoing, stripping away the masks and lies to reveal the twisted, hollowed-out husk beneath. As for me and Ron, we would carry on, stronger and wiser for the ordeal we had endured. And if our story could inspire others to stand firm in the face of manipulation and deceit, to embrace honesty and integrity above all else, well then perhaps some good could yet arise from the ashes of Marissa's shattered dreams.